In Great Brak River, not all violence hides behind locked doors. One attack happened in the quiet of a family home, a couple ambushed in their most vulnerable hours. The other, out in the open, at a roadside restaurant, where dinner turned into chaos and blood spilled under the fluorescent lights. Different settings, same undercurrent, trust shattered, and violence carved into the bones of familiar places. The walls didn't speak, but they remember. This is Brick and Blood, South African Town Tales. In the quiet coastal town of Great Brak River, where mist rolls off the lagoon and the morning smell of salt and soil, stood a modest home tucked behind a pair of iron gates. It was the kind of house that seemed to belong to time itself, solidly built, wrapped in the comfort of old plaster and warm timber, the roof rustling with sea wind. Inside lived Devi and Erika Himan, a retired couple in their golden years. Their days were spent tending to a garden that bloomed with hydrangeas and to the routines of a quiet life. He was 72, she 62. They trusted easily, perhaps too easily. Their former employee, Stefan Lekoru, 29, and his friend Tamsankwa Sishuba, 27, forced their way in, not by breaking glass or prying doors, but through a betrayal from within. They knew the house intimately, its inner locks, its quiet patterns, its inhabitants' trust. In the garage, Sishuba fell upon Tevi with a panga, delivering 7 savage blows to his head. Meanwhile, Lekoro forced Erika into her bedroom. She was stabbed with a homemade knife, first in the chest, then in the neck, her life extinguished in the sanctuary of her bedroom. The house was locked when police arrived. Days had passed since anyone had seen the Himans. And when officers forced their way in, the silence that met them inside the home was suffocating. Both had been dead for days. The house still neat, bore no signs of a struggle. There were no broken windows, no jimmied locks. It was as though the killers had simply appeared and then vanished. Detectives soon pieced together a trail of evidence. The bank account showed suspicious withdrawals. A sum of around 14,000 rand had been transferred electronically just after the murders. The house, though not ransacked, was missing some electronics, like a cell phone, a laptop, some jewelry missing. Forensic teams found fingerprints, one palm print in particular, on a bedroom surface that did not belong. It matched that of a man named Tamsankwa Sishuba. Sishuba had a history, but more importantly, he had a connection. He was a friend of Stephen Lekoru, a man who had once worked for the Himans. Lekoru had been in their home countless times, and it was he, authorities would later argue, who planned the murders, convinced his friend to help him carry out the murders. For what? For money, for convenience, for nothing worth the blood they spilled. Sishuba was arrested first, less than a month after the murders. He confessed, then he retracted. His story changed. First he said Lekoro did it all. Then he said he was forced. Then he said nothing. But the evidence clung to him like a shadow. The palm print, the stolen items, the transaction. By September 2017, Sishuba was on trial. In the sterile light of the courtroom, the details of the murders emerged again, each one unraveling the comfort of the Himans family. The court heard how Tevi was attacked in the garage with a panga, 7 brutal blows. How Erika had pleaded for her life before she was stabbed in the chest and then the neck. The judge called it excessive, premeditated, despicable. The court offered no mercy. Sishuba was sentenced to 2 life terms for the murders and 15 years each for the 2 counts of aggravated robbery. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was handed down. But outside, family members breathed for the first time in over a year, the beginning of closure. Erika's daughter wept as she said, quote, "My mother and stepfather were good people. They didn't deserve to die like that." But the story was far from over. Stephen Lekoro, the man police believed had orchestrated the entire plan, had fled. He'd vanished into Lesotho shortly after the murders, and for 2 years he remained out of reach. It was only in 2018, after a tip-off, that he was found in Bloemfontein and finally arrested. By then, the trail had gone cold, but the court wasn't interested in time past. It was interested in truth. Lekoro's trial began in 2019. He pleaded not guilty. He claimed he left the area before the murders, claimed he knew nothing. Sound familiar? But his lies fractured quickly. Investigators had phone records, they had voice notes, they had proof of the stolen money, there were messages between him and Sishuba. The judge wasn't convinced by his performance in the dock. The judge called him out directly. Here was a man who had betrayed people who had once welcomed him into their home, who used his knowledge of their habits and their home not for good, but for murder. He had killed for gain, and then he had run like a coward when the blood dried. In handing down the sentence, 2 life terms for murder and 18 years for each of the robberies, the judge made it clear. This was not justice delayed. This was justice fulfilled. And yet, some things are never restored. The house on Zandhoogte Road still stands. The new owners have painted the walls. They've replaced the furniture. But those who knew Tevi and Erika say the house has never quite been the same. They say that the walls, those thick, handcrafted bricks that once gave the house its warmth, they remember that even now, on quiet mornings when the mist rolls in from the river, the silence inside feels just too deep, too watchful. The saga was rooted in betrayal, in violence, and justice echoes through the community's architectural stillness. A homeowner's haven turned into a crime scene, its walls now silently recalling the days of loss and eventual closure. There's a quiet charm to Great Brak River when night falls. The river's gentle murmur blends with the distant chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Along Morrison Road, the hum of day-to-day life settles into a softer rhythm. The lights of Opis restaurant and pub glows warmly. This is a place built to welcome, with rustic wooden beams overhead, stone accents framing the walls, and an outdoor patio that invites laughter and quiet conversation underneath the stars. But beneath the surface of that welcoming glow, on the night of January 18th, 2025, shadows crept in. The evening had been like any other at Opis. The last orders were called, glasses were drained, and the familiar sounds of chatter and clinking cutlery began to fade. By 1:30 a.m., the staff were preparing to close, knowing that the next few hours would be theirs to tidy up before the town truly fell silent. Patrons had come and gone, stories had been shared in the cozy interior and on the sprawling outdoor patio. At around 1:45 a.m., two men approached the bar, their steps uneven, voices low but insistent. They asked for drinks, though the official closing time had long passed. The bartender's refusal was firm but polite. No service after hours. It was a rule, a boundary drawn for safety and order. The men's disappointment morphed swiftly into irritation. Words were exchanged, voices raised, but inside the calm wooden walls of Opis held firm. Yet outside, in the parking area beside the outdoor patio, the mood darkened. The parking lot itself is unassuming. It's just a stretch of asphalt. It was here that the altercation escalated. The men who had been refused service confronted a customer who was leaving, whose night was unremarkable until that very moment. Nearby, two staff members, a barman and the manager, stepped out to try and diffuse the tension, their voices calm but firm. The serenity of the scene shattered in an instant when a blade was drawn. What followed was a violent flurry of more than 25 stab wounds inflicted in the dim glow of the streetlights and the faint flickering patio lamps. The sound of struggle cut through the night, piercing the quiet like the sharp edge of the knife itself. The victims fought to defend themselves, their instincts raw and urgent against the sudden threat. The architecture of Opis, designed to comfort and invite, stood in stark contrast to the brutality unfolding just outside. Inside, the wooden beams, polished and sturdy, seemed to absorb the violence without a sound. The stone walls, crafted from durable local sandstone, held steady against the weather, yet that night they bore witness to human fragility. The outdoor patio, with its open view of the Great Brak River's dark ribbon, transformed from a place of camaraderie and rest into the backdrop of chaos. A 20-year-old named Heinrich Riddles was brought before the Mossel Bay Magistrates Court. The other suspect was released without appearing in court. This is a detail still shrouded in mystery. Legal proceedings have since been ongoing. A somber reminder of how quickly lives can pivot from peace to peril. But what makes this event linger in the memory of Great Brak River's residents is not just the violence, but the place it happened, a beloved local landmark where history, architecture, and community intertwine. Architecture is a language of reassurance. says Professor Kate Shaw, a human geography expert from the University of Melbourne. She continues, suburban homes are built to project stability and control. That illusion can be devastating when violated. The house, like so many in the area, lacked security alarms or cameras. It had a garden, a modest stoop, and a long hallway that echoed the past in every creak. Dr. Anina Tron, a forensic criminologist in Cape Town, explains, quote, in rural and semi-rural communities, homes often reflect trust in the environment more than in the physical security. That trust can become a liability. When violence enters such a space, it feels more shocking, not because it's worse, but because it breaks the unspoken architectural contract of domestic peace. End quote. But violence doesn't always wait for silence. Sometimes it erupts in public. Even amid laughter and shared meals, Opis restaurant has an open plan design. Tables are arranged for interaction. What was meant to foster community now amplified terror. Architectural psychologist Dr. Leslie Kern notes, quote, open plan public spaces like restaurants or schools are meant to democratize experience, to feel accessible. But when something goes wrong, an attack, a confrontation, there's no division of space to contain it. The violence feels larger because it's fully visible. End quote. And the Himan house, it still stands, quiet again. No crime scene tape, no news vans, just shadows beneath the eaves. The curtains remain drawn. Dr. Tron explains how spaces hold trauma. Quote, buildings aren't passive. They accumulate memory. For survivors, witnesses, and even unrelated residents, those memories become entangled in the physicality of the space. That's how architectural trauma works. It seeps into the everyday. End quote. It was a home, a restaurant, familiar places built for family, for work, for peace. But bricks can't stop betrayal, and walls, no matter how solid, they can't keep out everything. Great Brak River still breathes quietly along the riverbanks. But for those who knew Tevi and Erika Himan, or remember that night at Opis, peace now comes with echoes, the kind that don't fade with time. These spaces remain, doors repainted, walls cleaned, but the stories, they stay, etched into tiles, settled into silence. Thank you for listening to Brick and Blood, South African Town Tales. If this story moved you, disturbed you, made you look a little closer at the buildings around you, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your audio. And if you are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and share this episode with someone who believes buildings remember. Until next time, walk softly, listen deeply, and know some walls never forget.